Hello, Dante Zero.
Hello, KD.
Welcome to the PodStation by TrophiesonPSN. And
Woohoo, we're back.
sure to be a, what would you say? Would you say interesting topic?
Heated.
Heated topic this week?
Heated. I think it's the best way to go. It's the politest way to put it.
Got some crazy stuff in store this week. Before we do that, we are making a lot of changes still on the site, and I want to tell everybody, please be patient. We've got a lot coming with the front page. We're still tweaking a lot with our comments and stuff with news stories. A lot of stuff that I've been promising Dante for a very long time that I would get straightened out. So we're working on that, and we definitely want to leave the ability to put comments and everything on stories and kind of give your opinion. So that's a big part of what we're working on right now, as well as a lot of stuff in the background. We're still I'm still doing everything to get our SEO expert on there to make a lot of tweaks. I had to just unload a boatload of information to him, so a lot of stuff that's pretty scary to give up, as a matter of fact. But so everything's still moving forward. Please be patient. We're working.
Social media is getting bigger as well. Just want to say thank you to all those that have started to follow us more and get involved. And while we are live, you can of course tweet us. All you need to do is put the @ symbol, TrophiesonPSN, and you can tweet us during this live show as well.
Yeah, and I'm still learning that too. So if I hurt anyone when I push a button or anything, sorry. Somewhere it's shocking, I don't know. So anyway, been playing a lot of games. Spending just a ton of time with my family playing a game or two here and there.
Yeah, rumor has it you actually finally managed to get some platinum trophies.
Yeah, I know.
What's up with that?
I don't know. I ran across a couple of decent games, and I got kind of involved with them, and I've been going with less sleep and just kind of crunching away a little bit here and there, and I've been multitasking. I've been working on a lot of stuff site-related while also playing games. Like I'll play for a couple minutes, and I'll put my head back in the computer, and I'll play for... So a lot of interrupted gameplay, but it's kind of working out. It's a good little stress reliever in between there. But yeah, I popped a platinum for Rage.
Yeah, I was surprised at that because you did that pretty quick.
Yeah, it was relatively easy. Fast platinum. Honestly, and then I don't know. It's got a playthrough on a harder playthrough setting, but the reality is that you can kind of collect money and you can get some. You can buy some pretty serious weapons and stuff. So
yeah,
I kind of took advantage of that. Like I would just collect everything and go with the high-powered ammo.
Yeah.
And push
and
through
then
stuff.
Just kill everything.
Yeah. It's like at the end there's like all these, I don't want to spoil it, but there's hordes of enemies attacking you. So that's a good time for, a rocket launcher, for example. So you do things like that and it kind of changes the balance a little bit.
Yeah.
But
well, so besides Rage, what else have you been playing?
Well, I played The Walking Dead.
Finally.
And I can understand why that's was the game of the year. Absolutely fantastic story.
Yeah.
And I found myself playing it after I beat it, trying different options and just seeing how it played out.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Again, it's hard not to give away the story without, but I'll try to say without discussing it, you can change the outcomes based on your decisions. So I was seeing who supported me in certain decisions and who didn't by changing things. And that kind of a weird thing about it is you can go back to a certain point in the story and change something and still have your game save all the way through the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it kind of has like a rewind feature.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you played with the story a little bit with it, but
I didn't play with the rewind as much. I kind of wanted to go through and get I really wanted to see how it would all sort of turn out towards the end. And I'm kind of glad I did, to be honest with you, because the interesting thing with The Walking Dead and, game that I felt that certainly made it a contender, if not a winner for Game of the Year, was the fact that for once the actual moral choices you made in a game really had an impact.
Mm-hmm.
We hear it time to time from other games and stuff, that have offered dialogue options but never really affected the outcome. And The Walking Dead was proof that you can do it and implement that kind of feature into the game, and it does make a difference if it's done correctly. And it showed some of the bigger AAA games that sort of put that feature in there, how it's done, which was great from Telltale, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at what Telltale's past history is with other games, the Walking Dead is probably the pinnacle of all the work they've done so far.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
yeah, I played a lot of Telltale games, and yeah, and in the format too. I mean, you think almost like having it episodic and then having like choices. You think almost like it's going to be too much, like kind of force-fed movie versus gameplay, but it's really not. It's a nice mix, and it's got you've got elements in there where you're shooting and doing things like that as well. So it's not just picking your path.
Yeah.
It's not only that.
Well, I have to be honest. I'm thinking of going back through them again during the summer at some point, because obviously the DLC is coming out.
Oh yeah.
The 400 days, which will sort of be interesting to see how playing through 5 different characters' personal stories after the first game, the first season, and how that will affect, any decisions we made from the first game will affect how the DLC plays. And then obviously running into season 2 as well, which will be out at the end of this year.
Cool. I'm looking forward to that.
So it's good that it's got all that consistency, that the choices that you make will go across all the DLC and the seasons as well. Something I'd certainly like to see them continue on, should they make it past season 2.
Definitely. And it's one of those things too with trophy hunting. I can say this was refreshing. You could just play, and you earn the trophies.
And none of this stupid having to go and do specific things.
Right. There's no you miss a collectible or something. It's like go back and play it just because of that. It's very you can kind of just wrap yourself up, and it's straightforward. So in that sense, it's
concentrate on the story and go back and replay it for replay's sake, as opposed to having to replay it for trophy's sake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, on a harder setting.
Yeah. So you played Walking Dead, Rage, anything else?
Well, I'm been playing The Last of Us and Far Cry 3.
I was going to say, should we not talk about The Last of Us for a minute?
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, we can use that to break in, but let's do your pick of the week here, and then.
I was going to tell you what I'd been playing this week.
Oh yeah, okay.
Because I've been a very busy boy this week.
Uh-oh.
I have been playing more of Defiance. Still chipping away, trying to get my platinum trophy on that. 1 trophy left to go. So I've been logging in on a daily basis to try and get some of the faction-related stuff done on that. But I'm kind of looking forward to the DLC that should be coming in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, definitely going to dip back into that. What else have I been playing? I've been playing Machinarium on my PlayStation Vita. I've already beaten it on PlayStation 3, but I picked it up while it was cheap on PS Vita a few weeks ago and hadn't got round to playing it. And I finally decided this week was the week to do it. And I've got to admit, I still have much love for Machinarium.
Now, did you have to look up a few videos here and there on Cause
No, I did remember a lot of it from
well, how about the
from
first
when I
time?
did.
It's one of those games.
Yeah.
It's easy, but it's at the same time there's things where you're like, oh yeah, should have thought of that.
No. To be honest with you, I was fine with it up until the last bit with the ladder. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but towards the end, there's this really tricky bit with the ladder, and I'd completely blanked and forgot how to do that. But so I did have to look that bit up. Yes, but yeah, for the most part, I've been playing Machinarium. I also went back to finish some trophies on Jacob Jones and the Bigfoot Mystery, which I still love. I can't wait for the rest of the season to come out for that. Definitely looking forward to more episodic content, sort of in the style of The Walking Dead. It's kind of, you get an episode every month, and they're pretty cheap as well, but they're very good games, very well made. So, Jacob Jones and the Bigfoot Mystery, which, for those that have been following the PodStation, was actually a pick of the week a few months back. So, I've been playing that, and of course, like you, I've been playing The Last of Us as well. In fact, I've been playing that unhealthy a lot. I've been bashing my way through multiplayer, which I still kind of have a warm fuzzy feeling with it, just because of the metagaming there. It's kind of funny and depressing at the same time. For those that don't know too much about the multiplayer side of it, we talked a little bit about it last week, but there's a very cool feature which, if you have Facebook, you can connect to Facebook, and then when you recruit people for your clan, which is like your rewards for completing certain challenges in multiplayer, it puts real people's names towards your sort of clan members. So everybody in your clan ends up being a real person from your Facebook page. It's kind of funny when you end up losing clan members and they die or whatever because you missed out on a challenge and stuff, and you just see it pop up on your feed, and it's like such and such has died, and you think, I don't know, you can't help but laugh, but at the same time it's depressing as well. It's kind of like, damn, my best buddy on Facebook dead.
Wow.
So
is that
yeah.
kind of is that one of those things that could stir a little bit of controversy doing that?
Nah, it's a cool little feature to put in. Actually, we've talked before about social media and stuff, and like how it isn't utilised in games as good as it could be. Bar I've earned a trophy on such and such, or I've hit this score or completed this challenge. Actually, there's a point to having it in there, and it's a cool little feature and it's a unique way of doing it, and I certainly would like to see more kinds of things like that within multiplayer modes for games as well. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun playing it, to be honest with you, and it'd be sad when I sort of hit week 12 again on the second faction, which I'm playing through as Hunters at the moment. It'll be sad when I hit the 12th week of that, and because that'll be kind of me done with multiplayer. But I've been playing with some great people, especially on TrophiesonPSN, staff members and actual members as well, and we've had a lot of fun doing it as well. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been playing, lots and lots of different games, much like you.
Cool.
I'm still not platinum anything at the moment. Seems to have gone on a bit of a drought at the moment.
Yeah, you're kind of picky on what games you finish all the way, aren't you?
No, it depends. I wouldn't say I'm picky about it, but
well, I mean, you're not concerned if you have an
I'm not
percentage.
I'm not bothered if a game sits on my trophy list at like 40% for a year or so. I'm not really don't care.
I had this new thing where, like, if I really like the game, I'm gonna finish it.
Yeah, I always maintain, any game that has a story mode on it, I'm as long as I beat the story mode, the trophies come like second, and even then they're not really that important. As long as I've had real chance to play the story, and if it's got multiplayer, I'll have a bash on that as well. But at the end of the day, you know me, I'm a collector. Things will sit on my shelf for months, years maybe, and then one day I might just decide to go back and do it. I'm not in any rush.
When the server's closed, you go back and decide.
Yeah, I do keep my eyes out on those sorts of things. So, I am aware that some companies shut down servers, which is annoying. I'd really wish they'd do something about that and patch it so that when you fire up the game, all the online trophies just popped or whatever.
Yeah.
Make it fair for those that have bought it. But let's stop boring people with what we've been playing, and let's get into the PSN pick of the week. This week, it's our favourite price, free. So that should give you an indication of what I'm going to recommend here. But I've played this week as well, only slightly enough to sort of get involved with it. But I've actually enjoyed it, and I think a lot of people will do as well. We are talking Tekken Revolution. It's a free-to-play game, and you can download from the PSN store now. It's about 2 gig. It's available in most regions. It has trophies as well, and I believe it has platinum as well. So it's like 13 trophies, and it's got a platinum, so it's worth downloading and donating some of your time to it. Essentially, it's the Tekken we all know and love. Obviously, it's a fighting game. It's done slightly graphically different from previous Tekkens, I'd say. It's more sort of, it's got this kind of cell shading effect on it, which actually looks quite nice. But the concept of this free-to-play game is essentially you're given tokens. You've got arcade tokens and battle tokens and premium tickets. And the arcade tokens allow you to play the arcade mode. Every time the battle tokens allow you to play online multiplayer. And the premium tickets allow you to get more tokens and stuff. You can obviously buy more tokens through microtransactions, but for those that are not willing to obviously buy extra tokens through microtransactions, once you use a token, it actually refreshes every hour, every half an hour and an hour, so you actually get tokens the longer you play. Which is actually quite nice, I think. It's the way that microtransactions and free-to-play games should be. It's a case of, well, yeah, if you want to go out and buy 10 battle tokens and do 10 online battles in a row, that's fine. But you can also sort of fire the game up, do your daily thing on it, exit out the game, come back to it a couple hours later, and you've got more tokens to play again. So you can build up that way, and it's really well done. The other interesting aspect of Tekken Revolution is you only essentially get about 6 characters in total, and these are some of the most popular Tekken characters like Paul, Jack, Law, Kazuya, and a few others. And you can actually, there's an RPG element to that as well, because when you then do the fights with your friends online or through the arcade modes, you actually get money, and then you can spend that money to upgrade your characters, so you can make them more powerful, you can make them quicker, and you can add extra health to them as well, which then in turn, when you then go to play it online, it actually means that there's, depending on how you've leveled up your character and used your funds, depends on how much of a better strategy you may have against opponents you come up online against. So yeah, I'd highly recommend people go and check that out. As I say, it's, people will probably be concerned that it is a free-to-play and there are microtransactions, but I've got to be honest with you, Katie, because I know how you feel about microtransactions and stuff, but it really is free to play done properly, and I can't emphasize that enough. For once, it's actually nice to have a free to play game that isn't complicated, doesn't have too many complicated systems to it, and really is just a blast to play. So yeah, this week's PSN pick of the week is, as we always say, everybody's favourite price of free is Tekken Revolution.
Cool.
So go download it. And for those that are interested as well in the fighting genre, keep your eyes peeled, because there actually is going to be a Dead or Alive 5 Ultimate Plus free-to-play game coming in the next few months as well. So if that's your cup of tea, if you're not really into the Tekken universe and the story of that kind of thing, you will have an alternative option with Dead or Alive in the coming months, and it'll be interesting to see how these all pan out, because we've known for years that fighting games actually make a lot of money off things like costumes and DLC and stuff, and it now seems to be a case of where we're getting yearly versions of certain fighting game franchises, but they're kind of obviously taking a step back, and now they're coming back with free to play, and that is a great incentive to see how the whole free to play system is going to work, because we've seen it on PS4 that it's going to be a huge thing when PS4 launches, all these free to play titles. So if these fighting games that are doing free to play can be quite successful at doing them and nailing it right, for us as gamers and trophy hunters, it's going to be great going forward. If they can take that blueprint that the fighting games are starting to put out and execute that with their products as well.
Okay, cool beans. Now to jump into the main event. I'm gonna say it like that, the main event.
Into a new challenger.
So, you had this idea for discussing the perfect score.
Yeah.
And I've linked that to, in my mind, how that relates to a lot of things with how you would judge a video game. And so I'm going to share my thoughts today.
God help us all.
I want to play, partly I want to play devil's advocate, and partly I'm going to share my thoughts on a lot of things, because as video gamers, we have to understand that anytime there's ratings, reviews, anything really that you read out there, you have to be prepared that there's a large part of opinion that comes into play. You can't look at anything and say, well, everyone thinks it's the best game in the world, so it must be. Because largely everything's going to be affected by your personal experience with gaming and your choices, and you can have the love of a game from a certain genre. You could like old school type games, and the new stuff might not sit well with you because you like maybe the old stand-up arcades, for example. We're talking about fighting games there. There's a lot of people that are exclusively into that. It all has a lot to do with your style, the choices in gaming that you make, what you feel comfortable with. I've met more than one person that their idea of playing video games they have to have arcade sticks, fighting sticks, and that kind of thing.
I was going to say, my input on that was fighting sticks do make fighting games a hell of a lot better. Yeah. I have one, although I'm lazy and I don't plug it in, but I probably should, because then I'd do a lot better at it. But yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, we can remember back in a time where, games. Let's face it, they've become a lot more complex. They've been a lot more story-driven. There's a lot more buttons on the controller. There's a lot more to think about and consider, and a lot more that can be packed into a game that's on a Blu-ray disc than. I can remember a few years ago, like all the Atari classics came out, and it was basically an old version of the Atari controller, and like every Atari game was like available. You could just plug that thing into your TV,
Yeah.
and it had every game stored on it because they were so small in terms of
We've
size.
even seen it, yeah, but we've even seen it this generation, with like the Capcom arcade cabinet classics,
Oh,
where
yeah.
you only press two buttons, and the same with what was it, the Sega Genesis collection, or as they call it over here, the Sega Mega Drive collection. Most of those games were all like one buttons, or one button or two buttons.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So I mean, the appeal for games is just widely varied. So I'll say that, and I'll start with that because I think that at least now, to me, I think scoring, and correct me if you disagree, but I think scoring nowadays, the scoring of video games, is largely pointed more at the storyline than the gameplay.
No, I disagree with that altogether, but I'd also question whether or not the scoring even matters these days. Back in the day, I would probably make an argument that scoring was kind of important when you had, publications of, mass publications of gaming magazines, but we've come to a day and age where we now have a worse system in terms of, a site like Metacritic, for example, that affects how developers and publishers pay each other and so on like that. And I think that's bad because then it creates this whole kind of seedy back thing of making sure that certain developers get certain publications or certain sites get copies of games early, and there's all this blacklisting that we've seen go on before, and questionable reviewers before, and all of that stemmed from this need to essentially get high scores on Metacritic, and I think that's BS these days. I do like the scoring system. I think there is a place for it, but not with all the attachments that we seem to have towards it now, and the effects that it has now as well. Because essentially, if some studio releases 3 games and 3 games only make 80 score or whatever on Metacritic, that's not to say that the game's rubbish. 80 is still a fairly good score, but then that studio might get closed down, and I think that is a little bit unfair if an 80 score isn't that bad.
Well, I mean, you're talking about there being some kind of almost corruption in the system, but generally you got to ask yourself too, do people, are you greatly swayed by those reviews? Do you think people largely are? Because I mean, we're talking about, our topic today is the perfect score, and I haven't seen a game yet throughout history, and I've played a lot of games, that I would say is the perfect game, that deserves a perfect score, because perfect entails that it's everything that you could want.
Well, I think, a lot of sites and reviews these days have grown up to the fact that, a perfect score doesn't necessarily mean that it's perfect. The game is perfect, but it's as close to perfect as it's going to come. And that's essentially what a 10 out of 10 means, whereas I think there's still this misunderstanding from people that do take reviews seriously and do decide their purchasing habits based on a review score. I still think there's that mentality to say, well, it got 10 out of 10, which makes it a perfect game. And even if a reviewer has said that's as perfect, as close as it's going to come to perfect, is a 10 out of 10, because otherwise then, if we start talking, well, to get a perfect you need to get 11 out of 10, and it just gets all a bit silly then. So, I think that having a 10 out of 10 score isn't a bad thing to have, as long as people recognise when they read that review that, it's as close as it's going to come to perfect. But as you say, no game has ever really been truly perfect. You know, there'll be a technical flaw here, or you know, somebody won't like it on a whim, won't like a specific thing, like a tree in a background, for example. A lot of people criticise, for example, Gran Turismo 5 because it had 2D trees in it, and kind of got stuck on that fact as opposed to the rest of the game. And it was odd sort of seeing all that kind of crap hit the fan, really, because it's kind of like, is a 2D tree really that important in the grand scheme of the game? And it wasn't, but yet people would still get stuck on that small factor, which then brought its score down a hell of a lot more than it should have. And the same with other aspects of it, in terms of, you know, everybody was so quick to review Gran Turismo 5 that they actually missed out on several of the points, and even the developers, Polyphonic Digital, caught them out. Because they said, you know, you play the game for a couple of weeks, you build up the experience, you get more levels, and as your levels go up, the cars start to increase in damage modifications. And yet one of the biggest criticisms from the initial reviews when it first released was that there was no damage. The cars weren't showing any damage. And so reviewers were quick to grasp that, but they hadn't played the game long enough to realise that there was actually this whole other system implemented in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, it caused the score to go down. But, you know, I can't help think that if they hadn't been so quick to judge it, that the score would have been higher, and, you know, it may have actually done better in terms of sales. And the same with, you know, other games that, you know, I was seeing some 10 out of 10 games get 10 out of 10 scores that I've just thought are terrible.
Like?
Well, I don't particularly want to mention them, but I will just say they are available on other platforms. So
Okay.
I won't go too much into that, because they're on platforms that, you know, that we really don't play these days anymore. But, you know, just, as I say, you know, they've been considered as close to perfection as you could possibly get. But the truth of the matter is they've actually been terrible.
Well, I would encourage people to. One of the things I'm leading up here to is my take on scores. I don't read a score and use that as a determination to get a game or not. I won't let that tip the scale for me. I'll glean information out of that, and I can really appreciate score systems that are not about, it's got really good graphics, so it gets a couple points. It gets really good, this gets a couple points. I really like the systems that are like at the top end. They're like, you should probably get this. This is a title worth having. And then at the low end, it's like, this is broken, it's glitched, avoid it. That's the kind of system that I look forward to. And there's so much subjective stuff put in there, and just like you say, you have these opinions, and it's like you can read a review and a person says, I've played fighting games my whole life, and so I tried this and I did not like this shooter, and you're like, well, this is, you're admitting this is the first one you've played, or a game is so unique, it's a one of a kind indie kind of thing, and somebody just doesn't get it. And they're like, well, this is stupid. And you're like, well, I played it, and it's genius. It's absolutely new kind of gameplay. Those kind of things, I played Flower, for example, and there was a lot of weird vibes in the way people were talking about that, because you're playing essentially as the wind, and it's a totally unique gameplay experience that I've never seen in any kind of other context. How do you look at that and say, well, you're playing as the wind, that's stupid? Well, no, it's not. It's an ingenious new way to play a game, and it hits in that remark, and it hits in that regard. And, so that's why, I don't know, reviews as a whole, I can't appreciate ever seeing a perfect score. I can't ever appreciate seeing a perfect score. Nothing's perfect.
Bring up the Flower topic, because one of the problems that people had with Flower in terms of that was how to actually review it. It was that kind of game that challenged can you actually even put that in a review category? And I still think, you know, the other games like Journey, for example, you know, we all know that these two games are fantastic and unique in what they do, but how do you review them?
Yeah.
How do you put a score on it? Because what they're sort of presenting in their uniqueness and their design ethos and so on comes through so clearly while playing the game. It's kind of like it's an injustice to actually put you know, a score on it, because you can't really score that, you can't gauge that, because it's doing something so far different. You know, how can you sort of whack a score on the end of it and so on? Because, you know, we've talked about the personality of reviewers as well, and while everyone may enjoy it, there is going to be difficulty to actually say to them, well, is it unique enough to warrant a close to perfect score or not? You know, if it isn't, then do we give it a lower score? Or it's difficult.
Well, that's why I say the story is a big push for scoring, and you're going to see that a lot with rating systems. You know, what was the story like? And that's where we're talking about these things kind of falling in between the crack, because people are like, Flower, okay, the story is, you know, and then that takes away from the score, just because that's a category that they've got in their head that it has to be kind of rated. And especially comparing with, you know, as we go forward with technology, don't you think story-driven games are, I mean, the stories are getting very elaborate, very in-depth. They're carrying into sequels, you know, all this stuff that never happened before. Go back to the arcade game. Go back to games, you know, 20 years ago. There wasn't a story with any of them. They were like,
Frogger.
Fight. Yeah, get across the road. The story.
Yeah, without dying.
Get across the road without getting hit.
Yeah. But you're right in terms of the you know, the focus is to go on more cinematic, story-driven games. But again, you know, does a score even matter when it comes to the story? Because, as I say, you know, there are occasions where I play games that have a great story, but they're so badly executed in terms of the technical flaws that, you know, it doesn't make the game unplayable, but it takes things away from what they're really going for with the driving the story. So even though you can kind of see that there's a fantastic story there, you know, other areas let it down, but does that mean it should get a lower score for that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying about how inconsistent it can seem to be these days? And, you know, we talked about this before we came on air, when we said, you know, that there are other factors to bear in mind, because we're talking about the makeup of a review and you know, how people come to score it, and that yes, there is an element of personal opinion in there, but there's also the fact that certain outside factors can also hinder a review as well, because, you know, in the case of The Last of Us, we all know it's scoring highly, it's getting 10 out of 10s, and, you know, rightly so, I think, personally. But one of its biggest draws is it's a game that should appeal to everyone. That should make everyone, regardless of whether you're a fan of particular genres, you need to go out and play this game. And yet, I wonder how much of things like, you know, I talked with GTA Man about this before. You know, how much of his fanaticism for GTA would put him off saying, you know, The Last of Us is the greatest game that he's ever played, for example. You know.
Yeah, you can't say that. I'm a GTA fanboy. That's, you know, you can't.
But, you know, in fairness to him, he did say, you know, The Last of Us is a great game. But the reason I'd point that example out is because then you can apply it to things like the millions of people that buy COD every year that are COD fanatics, and yet how many of them are prepared to actually go on record saying, well, yes, I love my Call of Duty, but The Last of Us is the best game I've ever played, or The Last of Us doesn't, justify a 10 out of 10 because I'm never going to play it because it's not a first-person shooter like Call of Duty.
Yeah, the genre, the appeal of a genre. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, what we're talking about here then, so what should affect a score? Do you think if a game is glitchy, that should affect the,
It depends on how glitchy it is. I mean, I couldn't, even as a want-to-be writer and, get in the industry and look at doing reviews and stuff and things like that, I couldn't imagine how difficult it is to develop a game, say, in this case, The Last of Us, the technical expertise needed to drain every drop of juice out of a PS3 must be extremely difficult to do. And there are going to be occasions where you may get a tiny bit of screen tearing, or an audio glitch may occur, but it's not something that's going to take you out of the universe and affect the mood of your playthrough.
Mm-hmm.
So if it has a technical glitch like that, I don't think that's important then, because why should it be important if it's not going to break your game and it's not having an impact in the actual game itself? However, if we are then talking about game-breaking bugs, case in point, Modern Warfare 3, the first 3 days we could, on PS3, we could only play single player, and then the following 3 days we could only play multiplayer, and it took them a week and a half so that everything that you'd bought the game for, you could access. In that case in point, yes, the score should have been reflected in that, because you're talking about actually breaking the game to a point of where it became unplayable. And even in other games, even regardless of the launch issues, even in other titles such as one of my pet hates with Damnation was that it was so buggy and unplayable. You drive a bike and you crash it into the wall and the bike's stuck in the wall and you can't get back on it or off it, and you've got to reboot the game. And in that case in point, yes, it should be case in point where it affects the score because they're not even getting the basics right.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
just a basic gameplay mechanic, and if they can't get that right, then it should affect the score.
Okay. So we've got kind of story points, genre. What about open world? Do you think being more open, does that give game an advantage for scoring if you have more things that you can do, or you have a very linear? What's your thought on that?
Well, I don't think games should be scored down if they're linear, because it depends on how it depends on why it's linear, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I know a lot of people, when it came to Final Fantasy 13, were turned off by it because they didn't have this open world experience, the towns that Final Fantasy fans had come to expect from the previous games, and so there was this linear side to it. It was only till you got to the end of the game that there was then this open world experience, but you could kind of see why they went linear, because they really were trying to push a much better story over the course of Final Fantasy.
That's probably one of the riskiest things you can do in the gaming industry too, is on a sequel just completely change the game, the game type and it's like changing genres. It makes your gamers that are your core gamers for that are like, oh, it's the 13th version, I'm going to buy that, and then it's totally different.
But, in fairness to Final Fantasy series, every Final Fantasy game is different from the past one, so there isn't too much problem with that. But I think because they went linear, there was a whole outcry of it, because it wasn't just a case of changing characters and stuff. You were actually then changing the whole experience of Final Fantasy from what people knew and loved. But at the same time, from Square Enix's point of view, was that they were trying to drive more dynamic, make it more story driven than previous titles. And in some ways it worked, and you could kind of see the same point, but then you were still kind of missing that open world experience, and that's what drove it to get quite a lot of criticism, to the point of where in some places in Japan they just couldn't give it away. They couldn't give the game away free or anything. So
wow.
But should the fact that it'd been linear affected its score? Not really, because I think that when people did eventually then review Final Fantasy 13, they took into account the history of Final Fantasy and classed that towards the review thing. And because it was such a dramatic change for the whole series, it did have an impact on it, and I don't think it should have. It should have just been classed as what it was. It should have been taken for what it is, and people should have taken into consideration what Square Enix were trying to do. And then obviously, as you say, you look at the story aspects and say, well, did it work? And actually, in the case of Final Fantasy 13, it did actually work.
But if if a game is open world, do you think it kind of gets some extra points tacked on there from the average perspective? Do you think that
I think it probably has done these days, but then when I think of open world games, and we've had this discussion about the whole potential issues that may occur with Watch Dogs, but my concern with open worlds is it's fine building a technically competent open world, but how can you fill that world and make it unique from every other open world game? In certain cases, like Just Cause 2, for example, they made it work because of the very nature of it had the old school mercenaries feel to it. And for that, it was great. And it was very well executed. But then on the other side of it, you've got Saints Row, where it just goes far and beyond. It becomes not unique, but it's like they're trying too hard.
Yeah. Well, I thought Just Cause 2, I hated it.
Did you really?
Well, it's one of those cases of overdoing the collectibles and the because Mercs 2, I loved that game. That's another one. I played the heck out of it. I beat it, played the heck out of it, played some more. Just in my mind, I think that open world, it almost gets some extra kind of brownie bonus points there for, it's if it works. I think we talk a lot about GTA and how it compare, a lot of open worlds and stuff kind of emulate that system, and I'm just glad that it kind of matured into, having that we have so many games that are open world and we have that option, because those are the kind of games, again, it comes back to perspective. We're talking about scoring here, perspective-wise. Those are, story-driven games that are open world, generally, for me, are going to get more appeal. You're going to get
But from an open world perspective, though, I think that they don't do enough to carry the story over into an open world.
Yeah.
I think
sometimes they don't.
Quite often what you find is that there's an overlying story, say in the case in point of Skyrim, there's an overarching story where you have to do a specific quest, and the open world side of things becomes a journey between point A and point B. So you get the quest and you go to the point where the quest is, and then you complete it, then you go back, and
it's linear,
you're traveling backwards and forwards through an open world, but it's like the open world itself isn't unique enough.
It's really just, what you're saying is it's really just linear, but then you can take breaks and do other things.
Yeah, and I'd rather say, for example, in Skyrim, for example, I'd rather have a quest where that open world is more utilised. In some respects, Assassin's Creed 3 actually did a good job with that. because it had some quests that weren't just about going from point A to point B. You would have to explore the area, you would have to hunt animals, you would have to build up your own community, and there was so much variety in doing that, which is why the appeal of Assassin's Creed 3 really works, because the open world in itself then became a kind of character that helps emphasize the story. And while the story in the world itself isn't necessarily linked, it kind of added to the atmosphere and there was point to it.
Mm-hmm.
In some respects, I know GTA man's probably going to hate me for saying this, but in some respects, with GTA 4, for example, the open world itself, while it adds character to the whole thing, besides, doing your missions and going to landmarks and the odd place here and there, pedestrians in the street and the other traffic become negligible because they're not really doing anything. You just you can choose to run over and shoot them, and yeah, that's a fun gameplay mechanic, but does it really do anything to emphasize the world that you're in, or add to the story, or even create an atmosphere? Not really.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the same kind of thing like when, Gran Turismo 5 has 2D trees. People are thinking that kind of takes me out of my element. And I can see that. It's like, I thought of this when I was playing, what was it, Need for Speed. We recently did the game night. I went and I got my hands on the game, and you're driving around the streets and you're seeing absolutely no pedestrians, no people walking, and you're kind of like, when you notice stuff like that and it's very striking, then it's just everywhere you go, it's like there's no people. It's ridiculous because it isn't part of the element. Like you're racing through the city streets. So it should involve police cars chasing you. It should involve
discussion with
crashes that are deadly. It should, it's a perspective thing again. It goes back to being subjective based on.
Yes, but the problem with say, in the case in point of Need for Speed is that you start filling those streets with pedestrians, because I would say other traffic, but there is other traffic in Need for Speed games, but you start filling those places with pedestrians and it changes the whole dynamic of the actual game itself anyway. The whole idea of the Need for Speed sort of franchise is really on pursuit, the cat and mouse type gameplay and the worlds that you can do that in, but at the same time you don't want to be filling that with pedestrians and stuff, because you want that to be the focus. You start putting pedestrians in there and it kind of changes the game altogether, because then you're not just fleeing from the police, you've then got to watch out that you're not running over pedestrians, and also there's the technical aspects of it as well. So I don't know if having pedestrians and Need for Speed would necessarily benefit that particular game, just because of the way that it is and always has been.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's get to the crux of the matter here today, because it may be kind of shocking, but I want to make a case that Far Cry 3 is a better game than The Last of Us. I'm gonna do it.
I can just hear the pitchforks starting now.
And that's fine. I'm gonna say, I'm a Naughty Dog fanboy. Love the story with The Last of Us. Uncharted was absolutely awesome. Loved all those. So, this isn't anything other than my perspective and take on it, that I don't think The Last of Us should be getting 10s. I don't think The Last of Us should be getting 10s. Let me start at the top. First off, a lot of these perspectives, too, they're a trophy hunter perspective. So let me start with that. Okay, fair enough?
Yeah.
If you're a trophy hunter and you're playing a game, is it fair to say that the rating should also kind of include or if you're looking for a good rating system, that it should also include the perspective of the trophy hunter. Because if you develop a game and it's absolutely terrible for a trophy hunter, and you're a trophy hunter, and the review doesn't include anything like that, it doesn't kind of allow for that, then it also you're kind of getting shorted on your ultimate goal for the game, playing the game. So let me start with that. The Last of Us. You've seen the system for the playthroughs. What do you think about having to play through to unlock the hardest difficulty, then having to play through on the hardest difficulty to unlock the plus version so that you can play through the third time?
I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that as a trophy hunter?
Yeah.
Now, let's say you're not a trophy hunter and that's not an issue, and you're playing through and you can enjoy the story. Doesn't that change things a little bit? If your perspective is you're a trophy hunter versus you're just someone just playing the game and you can just play through on the easiest setting, enjoy the story, aren't we talking about two different worlds there? Aren't we talking about two different things there? One's certainly a challenge for a trophy hunter, but at the same time it's also forcing the story upon the person 3 times. The same story. It's forcing you to play it 3 times.
If you're not a trophy hunter, then that would be negligible. Then it's not even really that important, because you're still going to play through the story, and whether you choose to play it multiple times, that's up to the player. The fact that they've included New Game Plus is actually a really welcome feature, whether you're a trophy hunter or not, because there is that then desire to go back and play through it again. And the fact that you're able to keep all your resources, your upgrades and stuff like that, means that you can, on your second playthrough, that you can play the game slightly different from how you played it in the first place, and so you get a different experience with it. And I think that's okay.
A different experience? See, I disagree, because being forced to play it 3 times.
Well, in the first time you play it, you may be inclined to go through it all guns blazing. The second time you play it, you've got your upgrades, you've got more weapons, you've got more stuff within your arsenal to be able to sort of go through and play it in a different way. So in certain points you could think, well, I'll continue to go all guns blazing in this part because I can do that. But in other parts you're probably going to use more stealth. And part of the thing with The Last of Us is that, not only does the ending itself compel you to actually want to go through and play it again. I don't know too many people that beat the story and then not felt like they've wanted to play the story again immediately. But at the same time, The Last of Us does a very good job, and it also, one of the things is it actually presents you with your stats screen at the end of the game. So even if you play it with the stealth thing in mind, your kill count's going to be very high, and given the very nature of the themes behind The Last of Us, that's going to make players really think about what they've actually done during the course of their journey. And maybe they want to go back and not have those kinds of stats hanging across them, because it's bizarre that you can play that game, stealthily as you like, and still rack up 200-300 kills easily over the course of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not necessarily sit well with some people, but the point is The Last of Us gets you to consider that in a very effective way.
I didn't feel it. And I, as a trophy hunter, not having the ability to play through on the hardest setting the first time and do it that way if I choose to, and just clear out my playthroughs, being forced basically to play it 3 times, I'm not happy with that. That's like the collectibles where you go through and you have zero chance of playing and finding the collectibles without going on YouTube and watching 25 different videos in a row to show you where every little crazy hidden, it's along those lines. It upsets me because it's a trophy hunter, challenge, but it's so out there that it's distracting. Okay, like I got to play through the game a whole bunch of times. What if it's, what's too much? You know,
Okay, but then taking another example here would be the case of Metal Gear Solid 4, which was patched for trophies. That requires a sort of minimum of 8 playthroughs to sort of really do everything on that. It's required for the trophies. Now, personally, it's not my cup of tea to go through 8 playthroughs. I think there's kind of a benchmark where it's okay, and then it starts to get ridiculous above that benchmark. But at the same time, I still wouldn't say that has an impact on the game itself. Yes, you may have to go multiple playthroughs if you want to do everything on it and get the platinum, but does that make it a less than worthy high scoring game?
yes,
Not really.
yes,
Because
yes. From the trophy hunter perspective, I think that should affect the score. But moving on, okay, let's talk story points. There's some things with The Last of Us, and I'm going to, again, going back, I'm going to compare it to Far Cry. First, let me say about the trophies. One thing about Far Cry that's interesting is it has collectibles, but then it also has somewhere you only have to collect like half the collectibles for a trophy. There's nothing too extremely,
taxing.
Yeah, you don't have to like look every single place. There's maps and stuff where it's like, yes, you have to get them, but then you can also pay for maps and stuff to find the locations. And so another example of how I think that it's better in the sense of trophy hunter appeal. Okay, but moving on, story points. I had tremendous difficulty with a few things from the story points. First off, The Last of Us is, almost the genre. I hear a lot of people saying that they ventured into the horror genre.
There was elements of that, yeah.
And, that's all fine and great, but, if you can't define the game and the story points don't support logic in a number of different ways for the person playing it, I'm not going to give it a 10. There's no way. And let me tell you one of the things that I'm talking about. Weapons. This is one of the biggest things that bothered me with it. Yes, I like the element of crafting weapons. I like the idea of bare bones necessities and stuff like that being very important to you. But as I played through, I pick up a pistol. I conserve my rounds. I'm hitting, all the infected over the head with everything I can find, so I can save my bullets for the boss fights, if you will. And I get a pistol and I put 20 rounds into it, and then I come across stashes of ammo, and I'm full. My ammo's full. Are you kidding me? I have a pistol and I have 20 rounds and I can carry no more, and I got a backpack on my back? Too much focus on the weapons. I got a lead pipe, and I can use it exactly 10 times. It's got little dashes underneath of it that, I crack someone in the head, and one of the uses is gone. And they're all exactly the same. It's not kind of a hidden element where you don't know how long they're going to last, and maybe it's varied. But every board, you get 4 uses out of it. Every lead pipe, you get 10 uses out of it. And I can't craft a weapon that I can, a lead pipe with blades on it that I can use unlimited and crack your average zombie in the head. Maybe occasionally have to use it to pry a door open or something, and it breaks then, and now I have to find a new weapon or upgrade it even further at some point. Wouldn't that be a better system than, well, you've got a board and it's got 4 uses. You've got,
Well, you can do that. That's kind of the point. You find a board, but you can choose to use it or keep hold of it until you find stuff that you can craft.
I just think that focus on weapons didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. Another big thing in the plot point. Okay, the infection, the fungal infection. How does one get that?
It explains that. It's transferred through bodily fluids and spores.
Bodily fluids and spores. So I can go out and I can manhandle and I can get, the infected's blood on me. They can bite me.
If they bite you, you're screwed. Basically.
Well, I mean, you're talking about things that, like, I mean, you're swimming in sewers and you know, like the whole idea of a fungal infection, what this is supposed to be, and the way you just have, like, oh, I see spores in the air, I put a mask on and I'll be fine, and I'll swim with that mask, and then, you know, oh, the air looks clear, I'll pull it off. You know, you have boss fights where you don't put it on, and the one type of boss is kind of like throwing fungal spore whatever at you. It doesn't set well with me as an element of the horror. An element of the horror would be you don't want to be exposed to that, so that you turn, that you know, it's like your typical zombie game. You get bit, what happens? You turn into a zombie. You're going to die and turn into a zombie. That should be part of the, you know, you can't get bit horror element of it, not just, you know, I've got to shiv this certain kind of monster because his skull cap is too whatever, and, you know, I don't know. Those things took away from me.
Yeah, but, I mean, it's not really important, though.
What do you mean it's not really important?
Well, because the emphasis is not really on the zombies themselves, or shall I say, the infected. It's not even, the emphasis isn't even on the many people that you kill, although there is this element of, you know, extreme violence and brutality throughout the course of the game. It's very much like The Walking Dead in terms of what makes The Walking Dead TV show so great is because the emphasis is on the characters and not the zombies.
Right,
and
but
so very much, you know, part of The Last of Us is, yes, there probably is some flaws or some plot holes in certain areas, but is it really that important in the grand scheme of things? It isn't. And, you know, The Last of Us, in some respect, is unapologetic about that, and that is great to actually see that, because it's like saying, well, we have to have these people in here, but we're not going to apologise for having them in there, because, let's be honest here, that they don't really matter as much as the relationship between the characters and the experiences and the stuff they have to go through to get to where they're going.
Well, see, I completely disagree, because you start off, you're in a quarantine zone. Essentially, we're talking about, that's a big part of the plot element. What the heck are you in the quarantine zone for? What's the risk of this infection if it's just simply, you know, you put on a gas mask when you see spores in the air in a certain area? It to me, it speaks of, you know, you're taking a horror element and you're putting it in there, but then you're saying, well, it's not really about that, it's about the story, and don't worry about that, it's just, you know, it's just about resources. There's too much focus on the tools, the resources, the weapons, and not enough focus on, you know, the horror element of the fungus and those people. And you even said it, you know, here's another thing, that whole, you know, we were talking about kind of the open world environment. As you go through this world, and you go into the different areas, didn't you went from encountering a lot of infected to encountering humans. So there's these huge groups of bandits, as they were, or kind of people living outside the thing. And, you know, it again speaks of, like, well, you know, why have that? There's little pockets of people that you're encountering, and not, you know, this other raging, nagging question, which is kind of the end of the world apocalypse infection that's going around. They're not changing. They're not changing instantly. They're changing over the course of years and months.
It's not so much the end of the world apocalypse. It's more the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially what you're dealing with.
I don't know. It kills the story for me.
That's come, you know, after it all kicked out.
Regardless, I thought
it's a horrible, gritty brutal kind of world, and that's what you'd expect. Not, I can't blame Naughty Dog for presenting that kind of thing, because at the same time, that's in some respect what's made the Fallout series so great, in terms of, there are plot holes in that, for example, but it's still this very gritty post-apocalyptic world that's brutal and unapologetic, and in certain aspects of the game, it is unapologetic, and for very good reason. I'm sure they could probably have said to you, if you were sort of sat on their design board or in their staff meetings, I'm sure they'd say, yes, KD, we take your point and notice, but why should we have to make concessions and be apologetic about it? Because let's be honest, the world we're presenting isn't very apologetic at all. It's not meant to be. It would take away from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. I'm going to say, for all these reasons, I can appreciate Far Cry 3's story a hell of a lot better than Last of Us. I'm not saying it's not good.
I was going to say, but as good as the experience is with Far Cry 3, the story is very... I don't know how else to put it other than it reaches a lot. It's very far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to a very gritty, brutal, real world that, these characters, through just pure chance, in some respect, have come together, and, you follow them on their journey, and as you progress.
So what's so believable about the story, then, in The Last of Us, for you?
For me, it's the hardship. The whole... Well,
you can create hardship in any game.
Yes, but it's the very much... one of the things that made, a game like Heavy Rain, for example, is it poses a question pretty much at the beginning of the thing, which is, what would you do for love? And kind of then explores all those avenues for it throughout the course of the game, through multiple choice and so on like that. And that's what made it great. And in The Last of Us, it kind of poses that question, is, what are you willing to do to survive?
What are you willing to do to survive?
Because
I don't get that. I don't get that.
Yeah, but you don't have to go and kill everybody to survive on it. But
what do you, in today's video game world, what do you care? It's not like a moral decision of like, do I kill this monster with the fungus face, or do I just sneak on past him? Don't I feel better about myself?
Well, no, there is a moral decision there, and they kind of touch upon it in a very subtle way, without sort of spoiling the story for people. There's a part where you come across some other characters on your journey, and one of the characters is a young boy, and he's talking to Ellie, and he's even saying, do you think that even though they are infected, that they still have a soul? Are these still people? Take away, they may be infected, but is there a person still there? And it does that very subtly. It asks that question, and that's not too far into the game to reinforce that.
I don't know. I found, the other thing, I found it glitchy. I think I told you, I shared a little bit with you. I've had times where I had multiple characters standing inside of each other. I had trouble with visual stuff, with the graphics kind of not sitting well with the background. It's the only way to say it. I have a trouble with the way Joel looks when he's bent over and he's moving forward, essentially crouched, and his knees are so far forward. He looks silly. If you actually ever look at it where he's bent over and he's moving that fast and his knees are out in front of him, it looks silly.
I've got to be honest, I haven't looked at too closely in that, because of the fact that I've been more conscientious about actually trying to make sure that I don't make too much noise. And I think that's that's where the survival horror comes into, the stealth aspect of it. Do you take on all those clickers, or do you sneak past them? And And so I've got to be honest, I haven't really noticed that. But then, having said that, I mean, I haven't really had that much trouble with it graphically.
The other thing I'm really disappointed in is, I gotta say it like this: is I watched all the gameplay footage and stuff, the trailers and things before the game was out.
Yeah.
I looked for a long time, even wrote an article on this about how I was excited about the idea of a game where you could go beyond just the normal kicking, punching, striking kind of actions and do things a little bit above and beyond, whether it was random or you were like, how should I say it, able to do a series of fight moves or something along those lines. Even if it was that, I would have been happy with either. Because you watch footage and it's like he's going to battle someone and he's got a hostage and he holds the gun up to the head and then the person, hears that the gun is empty and they react differently. I would have liked to have seen a lot more of that. I would have liked to have been able to bash someone's head on a dresser or sweep their feet out from underneath of them or.
I don't know about the sweeping the feet
those
out
kind of actions.
The other stuff that you mentioned, you do in the game, but again, that comes down to
it's
how
kind of a
you play
random thing, and it's in there, and cut scenes, and.
Well, no, I mean, it really depends on how you play it. I mean, you can take.
No, it doesn't, because you don't have control over that. There's no control over it.
Towards the sort of end sections, which I won't go towards spoiling, but towards the end sections, there were times when I took hostages, and sort of did that whole gameplay element stuff, and I had people shooting at me, and then instead, I was putting the person in front of me, the hostage in front of me, to take the bullets for me, and having to shoot people around me. But there's times where I'd had melee fights with people where, if there was a tangible service nearby, it would smash their head on the service.
Well, there's just a lot of stuff like that
that those things that you mentioned there really depends on how you set out to play it. Because
I don't agree. I was expecting that because it was highlighted, it was showcased more than, it stood out to me more than anything as a game player. And then, just to get my hands on it, and you've got little mini puzzles where you've got to take a ladder from another room, and I've got to place the ladder and where, that Ellie, protecting Ellie. You're running around and she can step out and kind of do her own thing and give you away, but then until you're on the hardest difficulties, you're not really concerned with her health. Yet she can just run all around. I had times where she was standing up 2 feet in front of an enemy on the easy playthrough, and she's not detected, and that kills the gameplay for me. That it's either give me some control, make her actions more relevant, or make me have to defend her when she makes stupid mistakes like that. But don't just have it so gameplay killing glitch, really, that occurs.
Well, I don't know. I personally think that's very small. It shouldn't be enough to sort of take you out of the whole thing altogether.
Oh, it did. And again, I'm giving you my opinions. Listen mode. What is that? Is that a superpower?
No, I think that's a very useful tool. I think I don't know. I imagine Naughty Dog probably had struggled very much with how can they put the emphasis on sound. I think the listen mode actually does it very well. It's not OTT sort of superpower feature as you kind of
see through the walls and see exactly where they're at.
Yeah, but I mean, how else would you do it? You know what I'm saying?
Put sound.
How else
put some kind of sound indicator where you can tell where sound's coming from. That's how you could do it. Or you could say, you know,
Yeah, but then you'd have to have like a mini map on the
you hear,
screen,
no,
and
no,
then
no,
you'd
no,
have
no,
a
no, you,
red
no, you
dot
wouldn't.
come up, and
No,
well,
you
how
wouldn't.
else would you do it? I genuinely
You say,
can't.
okay, well, you hear like 2 clickers that way, and you hear, you know, one normal enemy, human enemy to the left or something, and you have that. Um, you know, some kind of indication that
I
way without showing them through the wall, where you can track their movement and see where they're at. Throw a brick and distract them. That kind of doesn't that kind of it takes away from the whole, again, the horror discovery element, the fear of it, just
no,
as
because
much
to
as
be
the
honest
infection
with
does.
you, there's times where I'd use
The lack of
that that
infection.
that listen mode, and I've seen what's there, and I've been crapping myself trying to get past it without sort of, you know. And the game actually has several points where you're actually having to negate, you know, actually find your way through areas that are piled with clickers or enemies and stuff, and you know, you've kind of got to get through those areas. And I think the listen mode actually is a very subtle way of doing the whole feature, the whole system. So I think it just works. It's very simple. It's not overcomplicated. You know, and it's a good way of sort of essentially conveying somebody, because if you were trying to listen into things, you'd put, like, I don't know, a glass against the wall or something. Obviously, it's not doing that in The Last of Us, but at the same time, it's, if you're sort of creeping about, you know, trying to be stealthy, you are sort of concentrating more on listening to everything that is around you. A better sense of hearing, and I think the listen mode's fine for that. It's a very subtle way to do it.
Yeah.
It just works.
If you
You know,
say
it's
so.
not overcomplicated, and I think that's the beauty of the listen mode itself. It's not overcomplicated, and it gets the right effect.
I don't know. I wasn't so, um, you know, I had
Some
high expectations for this game. I really believe I've given this game a chance. The single player, anyway. I won't say I've experienced the multiplayer to know. I mean, that could be fantastic. I don't really
that,
know. I haven't given that enough a shot to answer. But I will say that, you know, overall, for me, The Last of Us is probably an 8. And I would probably give Far Cry a 9.
no,
And you know, I mean, take this to how it is. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to put this out there to be, you know, like this is one wasn't something special to try and like aggravate you or put you on the defensive about the game or something if you love it. This is really my legitimate feelings as a gamer about this, and that I think that some of these things, when they miss the mark, that's why I say it's so subjective to the person's gameplay style and what they're expecting and what types of games they like to play. And you know, the story is fantastic, but some of these other points that I feel could have been incorporated or could have been incorporated differently could have made the game fantastic, and I feel like they're missing. And you know, it's just, you know, it didn't feel stealthily to me. It didn't feel, you know, that it was, you know, I don't know. Far Cry, for example, you can throw a rock. At any time you can throw a rock and distract an enemy if you haven't been discovered. Um, you know, and then, you know, you take that same kind of element in The Last of Us, and it's like you have to find a brick or a bottle, and you have to carry that, and there has to be one there, or you have to have one in your inventory. I don't know.
yeah, but
Just
that
didn't
comes
feel
as
right. It didn't
part
feel
that
natural. It
but
didn't feel.
that comes as part of, you know, scavenging for supplies and stuff. So you know, you can store those and
You can
use
store one
them.
of those.
No, you can store multiple versions of them. I think the maximum you can store is like 2 or 3.
Of what, bottles and bricks?
Yeah, yeah. one or the other. You can't have like a bottle and 2 bricks. So
I thought you can only have one.
no, you can store them, but I mean, in fairness, there is plenty of them about. I can't speak for survivor mode if that's the same case, but you know that there is a point to having those in there because it does tell you that clickers do react to sound, and so you know that then becomes a question of choice of how you approach the problem. Then you've got a choice of where you can creep up and just shiv them, or you can distract them and go around them. So again, it sort of caters to give you the choice of how to play.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I think's a good thing to have, and it especially works not so much with clickers, but you know, with actual human enemies, where you know, even if you don't necessarily have any problems stabbing clickers, you know, that there is a moral aspect of it of how many people you actually want to kill by the time that stat screen comes up at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you pointed out, you know, that this is essentially as I pointed out, this is essentially the aftermath of the apocalypse. And surely the more human beings you kill, the less likely it is the human race is probably going to survive.
Yeah, I didn't think that
there
deep
is that
into it.
element. Yeah, well, that's what I mean. There is depth in so many different areas to it that some of the flaws are kind of negated, really. And you know, in the case of point of Far Cry, I'm not going to say that Far Cry 3 isn't a great game. It is for so many reasons within its genre, but is it pushing the benchmark of current AAA titles? I don't think Far Cry 3 is. You know, is The Last of Us pushing the benchmark? Yes, it truly is pushing the benchmark. That's the game that, you know, if you're making a story-driven game heavy on character focus, that's going to be the benchmark to beat. That's the game that everyone wants to beat now.
I didn't feel it, man. I didn't feel it. You know.
You know, by the time the credit screens roll up on at the end of The Last of Us, you truly feel like you've played something special. And you know, I would honestly say that if you don't feel like that by the time the credit screens roll up, then you would be in a small minority of people that thought that. Because
well, did you make big decisions that affect your story? Like we were talking about, like with The Walking Dead?
Well, put it this way, I felt like a complete and utter asshole at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that. And do I think... I think a lot of the actions that I took in the game, I did have a genuine emotional response of, damn, how many people have I killed and didn't need to? You know, if I'd just taken that bit more time and chosen to, you know, take a different approach, it really got me thinking about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that for me is what makes The Last of Us just such a brilliant game.
Okay.
I can't say there's ever been a game where I've sort of got to the end of it and actually felt like a complete asshole at the end of it. I still don't even know. I won't spoil the ending for people, but I still don't even know if I like the main characters in it or not. I'm still in a quandary about that. And you know, there are, you know, certain points that, you know, you haven't praised in terms of the fact that, for example, you mentioned the collectibles. What too many people might not know is, well, the collectibles add to the story, and you know, they have a usefulness in terms of, you know, pushing things along and explaining things that have gone on in and around the world over the time. Over the 20 years since the infection originally broke out, but actually the more collectibles you find, it does actually increase the dialogue the main characters have between each other, so they actually start to relate to the collectibles. So you may pick up, for example, there's one occasion where you pick up a note from one of the extra characters you meet's partner, and you read that note, and then you have an option to go and give it to that character, when you give it to that character, it then gives you an insight into other characters' pasts before he chucks the note on the floor. So there's these subtle little things that add to the whole aspect of it. And it's really down to you to find out. And to be honest with you, if you were travelling, say, cross-country with somebody, an acquaintance, over the course of your journey, even if it's just a boring journey of driving down a road, you're going to sort of be talking over the course of the days or months it takes you to get from point A to B, and you're going to want to try and find out as much information you can as from your travelling partner, your acquaintance, to relate to them, to have a dialogue there. But at the same time, there'll be parts of that where you'll just have dramatic silence in some respect, because there's nothing to kick that on, and the collectibles actually do a great job of, as I say, kicking on that extra dialogue aspect of it, making people want to open up, getting rid of those silent pauses. But those silent pauses are just important as the actual dialogue, because they just work well.
I don't know. I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on this one, because I didn't get it. I don't see the same things you're seeing. I think it's like I say, it's an 8.
I think it genuinely is as close to perfection as you
Nothing
can get.
Should get a 10 anyway. It shouldn't have the idea of it being the perfect game, the perfect score. To come back to our main topic, there should be no perfect score, because it's,
Yeah, but
that
then
says
by
that a game has absolutely nothing wrong with it, and it fits, it's going to be a must-have. Even a must-have for everybody doesn't exist. There's not...
Well, The Last of Us is a must-have for everybody.
Nonsense.
I think most people that have played it would even say that, it's a shame that people on Xbox won't get to play that game.
Well, what makes it a must-have for every gamer? There's gamers out there that aren't going to touch anything that involves a horror genre type survival.
But it is the whole experience of the game.
Well, again, we're coming back to something that's subjective.
It's
subjective.
Yeah,
I certainly could have waited on this title. I didn't know it was going to be...
Well, if you're looking at it from an individual perspective, it can be. But, we're talking about a huge collective of people coming together and actually saying, this is a game you need to play.
Mm-hmm.
There is consistency across a larger group of people.
I'm the odd man out, you're saying.
It's a game, as opposed to, the minority that's saying, well, actually, it's rubbish, or it's not worthy of the praise that it's getting. And I actually think it is worthy of the praise that it's getting, because there's so many elements to it that far outweigh any flaws that you've mentioned. There's so many elements to it, and there's so much depth to it that could be discussed for days, months even. And, those are the sorts of things that gamers should have in their hands.
Story. You're coming back to story.
Well, it's not just the story. I mean, you mentioned some graphical issues there, but again, how many games have graphical issues where it affects one person but it doesn't affect other people?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't say I can remember ever having a game where two characters stood inside of each other regularly.
Yeah, but during my experience with The Last of Us, that hasn't happened.
Oh, okay, well.
And that's what I'm saying to you, is it a game-breaking flaw, though? Not really. It's not going to stop you pursuing the game.
Huh.
And that's what I'm talking about. This is why I'm saying it's important to clarify, because where technical flaws are important to a certain degree, but only if you can't get the basics right. If you get the basics right, which, The Last of Us has, and, even to some extent they get some advanced features right, but if they're getting the basics right and it doesn't break the game for you, stops it being playable, then, it's not really important in the grand scheme of things.
Well, it was just one more thing that added to it for me, so.
Yeah. You're being far too negative on it, I think.
I don't think so. I think I'm being fair. I think I'm looking at it from the standpoint of my perspective, what I glean from a game, what things that take me out of the story, because there were a few of them, like I said, with the whole fungus thing, with the weapons, the listen mode, with Ellie, the whole protecting of her,
okay, but
and the graphical glitches. All those things pulled me out of it.
Yeah, but you mentioned things like the listen mode. You do realise the listen mode is optional. You don't have to use that.
I know.
Why don't you play it through without using it?
I actually did.
Well, there you go. So what was the problem?
Well, it's just the whole idea of it being there as an ability and the way it works.
Yeah, but surely that's another option.
You focus so hard on weapons and kind of trying to be, I guess the term would be realistic. And you play up that sound is very important, that you can hear clickers.
So I'm not.
You know, some of them being able to see you and some being able to hear you, and that whole.
So what you're saying is, with the weapons having an essence of realism, is a flaw to it?
No, because it didn't have an essence of realism to me. That's what I'm saying. Where I can only carry 20 rounds in a pistol and I can carry no more, or I have a lead pipe that breaks after 10 hits. Every time I have a lead pipe or a board that's 4 and it has the little markers under there, that whole thing just it irritated me to no end, because it was, it wasn't. My expectation was that I would have more control over my combat, and it wouldn't be button mashing.
Yeah, but I don't understand how you don't find that realistic. Things
I don't.
do break.
I don't.
That's one of the biggest gameplay mechanics that makes a game like, for example, Dead Island so popular, because things break as they should break.
No.
Otherwise,
no,
if you
I don't like it. It's an element that's not for me. I'd rather have skills, stringed combos.
Yeah, but let me put it this way: what if then you talk about swapping out the whole mechanic of the needing to find supplies and stuff like that? You just got rid of that altogether, and I gave you an assault rifle that has, as many bullets as your backpack can carry, and you can micromanage that, and a metal pipe that will never break.
Okay, if I chose to play through with that style, then yeah, I would say I would like that better.
But see, that would then take it completely away from that, because the realism is that
it's not realism it's not realism if we're worried about micromanaging these tools on a ridiculous level. Like I said, if you had a pipe that broke after 10 hits and it was random, maybe one breaks after 5, you use it to pry open a door and then you can no longer use it, or you something like that,
if
fine.
I'm going on a journey of hundreds of miles, of course I'm going to worry about how quickly first aid kits go down and how easy it is for weapons to break.
But I don't worry about getting exposed to a fungus.
How many bullets I'm going to... but you're kind of missing the point in terms of the...
I'm saying for me the focus was off. It shouldn't have been so keen on the weapons and to that regard, without having better controls for fighting, some better options for fighting.
Well, okay, let me put this another way then, because The Walking Dead the TV show does exactly the same thing. The emphasis is on supplies and utilising what's there and what people have access to. So would you then criticise the show that it's not realistic in that respect, because they're having to go out and look for supplies and utilise what they've got and make sure things last, and they can't carry...
Well, here's the thing. The drama that comes from that show comes from shelter, resources, but then also exposure to that.
But does the drama in The Last of Us not come as part and parcel of that as well?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah,
Nope.
But how can you say part of the drama comes from in one?
Because it's not implemented. It's not implemented right as an element. That's the only simplest way to say it. If you were to have the resources and everything done a little bit differently, give me some more options to kill, maim.
You have the options. You have the options to stealth. You have the options to go on all guns blazing. You have the option to do a mixture. You can go...
Well, those are crazy options. You can either go stealth or you can go guns blazing. Oh wait, that's right. You can only carry 20 rounds of ammo. If you come across more, Your
But you
pistol's
can carry
full. That's it.
multiple weapons. So
Tell me, you're in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. You've got a pistol. You fill it up with 20 rounds. You have no other weapons, and it's not like room in a backpack. We're not talking about I can carry extra rounds in a pistol, and therefore I give up carrying a stick to hit somebody with. Tell me you're going to
honestly,
leave behind boxes of ammo.
I would travel light personally. I'd
Oh, you
take
would not.
me.
You'd grab
Well,
everything you
sorry.
could. You'd have a lead
Also,
pipe that you know you could hit somebody over the head 100 times and...
well, no, there's only so much A, you can carry, and B, the idea is, do you really particularly want to fire a weapon off unless you absolutely have to? Probably not. I really wouldn't want to do that post-apocalypse. I'd be probably running more than I would
If we're
be
talking
fighting.
about realism, I think you would probably stealth more than anything, and if you had to fight someone, you probably wouldn't want to hit them with a board. You'd want to shoot them first.
Well, if I haven't
That's
got
the
any
realistic
bullets,
element of it.
yeah,
What I'm saying is, like, look at the cutscenes beforehand. I want to elbow someone. I want to, push a filing cabinet off of a ledge and onto a dude and crush his, whatever. I want to do that. I want to, like, push him down and run around behind the corner where he can no longer see me with his clicker thing. Something, other interactivity,
There's times where I've had them, tracking me down, or they've seen me and I've run away and hid,
Okay.
and it works.
All right, maybe you're just not seeing my whole what I enjoy in the game, but it's not there. It's not there for me. The Last of Us, like I said, I give it an 8. I'm enjoying Far Cry twice as much. I would give it a 9. I like the skills. I like the gameplay. I like the way the collectibles are done. I like the way it's an open world. The story works better. It's
This is the story work better in Far Cry 3.
Yes, the story works better for me in Far Cry 3.
I don't think so.
Just plain trying to live.
The story in you're not in Far Cry 3, are you? Really? It's not a case of you just trying to plain live. It's so far fetched. It's unreal. The first half of the game is
no more
really
than most
good
video games.
story-wise, and then the second half of Far Cry 3 lets it down completely. It goes far too fantastical, and there's no need for it.
Okay.
And that's just based on the story side of it. So I don't know how you can consider the story any better, because it's inconsistent.
Yeah, it's more involving for me. It's more involving. There's more to do. I can pick my directions better. I like it.
But you can pick your directions just as much as you want in The Last of Us.
No.
Of course you can.
It's linear.
It's not as linear as you may think, but then isn't Far Cry 3 linear in some respect, because you still have to go forward to beat the story?
Well, it's no more than
still
anything else. The single player main story in anything that's open world. So.
Yeah, but that's an open world that makes it linear. The Last of Us isn't open world, but it's a linear action experience with elements of freedom to it.
Yeah, you can hide or you can go guns blazing.
Yeah, you can.
My options are bountiful.
You can not engage at all if you didn't want to.
I don't know.
But is that
I don't want to
not the
argue
same
with you. This is my opinion.
Is
It's
that
an 8.
not the same options
It's an
you've
8.
got in Far Cry? Is that not the same options you got in Far Cry 3? You can go all guns blazing, or you can hide and be stealthy. What other options does Far Cry 3 offer then? If it beyond
you have
stealth and
skills that you learn and that you can do, so you can do different kinds of kills, stealth, and utilize weapons differently. Everything from dual wield to, you can use skill points to basically increase your skills in the areas that you want to. So you can reload faster and be steadier and hold your breath longer and swim faster. And
you can do that in The Last of Us.
Can do what?
Upgrade skills and stuff. What I'm saying to you is, beyond the whole stealth kill and guns blazing approach, besides those two, what other methods does Far Cry 3 offer you?
Well, for one, I like the trophy aspect too, where I don't have to do the playthroughs. I guess I would say the genre appeals to me more too, because I can appreciate a game where you can fight, where you can shoot, where you can kick and you can punch and you can elbow and you can do creative, sneak up on someone and do a creative kill quietly. Um, I don't know. I like all of that in the sense that it's a mix. It's a healthy mix, and it's not just what Far Cry seems to bring.
Is apparent in both games.
No, I don't. I don't feel that. I don't feel that.
It's irrelevant whether you feel it. It's fact. They are both the same in terms of that aspect of it. Yes,
no, they are not. Oh my God.
They are. They are exactly the same in terms of offering those options. One does it in the view from a third-person shooter perspective. The other does it in a first-person perspective.
Okay.
If we put The Last of Us into a first-person shooter perspective, you would essentially be talking about the same games, just with different ways of doing things, certain aspects of it. But Far Cry 3 would lack the depth and emotional, connection and the actual epic story.
All right.
And all the small things that actually really matter being pushed to the front, as opposed to the small things being a nice, cool, optional thing.
All right. Well, we're getting to the point. All we're doing is arguing. I am going to say, my opinion. It's an 8. Last of Us is an 8. My minority opinion, that the whole entire world disagrees with. The Last of Us is an 8. It's not as good as, for me. I would play Far Cry 3 any day over it. I'm looking forward to the next big game, and I'll finish up my platinum in The Last of Us. But I'm not going to say that I'm a satisfied customer. I expected more, especially from the makers of Uncharted 2 and 3, and that phenomenal game. I liked the element of jumping from cliff to cliff and all that, and it was kind of I don't know. It's missing from this, and hopefully they'll switch over. They'll do an Uncharted 4 or something.
You want cliff jumping in The Last?
I do.
Really?
Yes, I would have loved that. Are you kidding? That's what we're talking about here. Put some elements in there that make some freaking sense. That give me some more control and some more things that are.
Yeah, but in Uncharted, for example, it makes no sense because Nathan Drake is kind of portrayed as this everyman who.
Well, we can sit here and we can talk all day about how video game story plots don't make sense. We're not talking about that. I don't know that there's any video game story plot that's going to make 100%, perfect, realistic sense. It's not going to happen. You heal in games, you bandage yourself up, and you get all your health back. That's
what I'm saying is
a necessary evil across video games.
Well, if that's the case, then why bash The Last of Us for being in the same position as that?
Because, to say it again, those story points are broken strongly. From my perspective, they're broken strongly when some of these other things are put in there. The fungus thing, the weapons, the listen mode, Ellie as a NPC, those things kill the story. Period. That's my opinion, because those things kill the story for me. They don't work for me from my perspective. They took me out of the game. It didn't have as much to offer as you feel it offers, because the story and all that other stuff, while it was fantastic, was not as involving and as engrossing when those elements are put in there. It kills it for me. So
you take out the weapon system, you take out
I would change
Ellie
the weapon
altogether.
system. I would make Ellie either better or require more, fix some glitches, take out listen mode altogether, or change it drastically. Have some cliff jumping, yes. If I got the buildings are all falling down and all that other stuff, yes, I got to jump, I got to climb, I got to worry about falling on stuff and stuff collapsing.
You're only worrying about yourself and not the people you travel.
It's part of the element.
No, it's not.
Post-apocalyptic world.
If you're traveling with a young companion, you're not going to expect them to be jumping cliffs.
Well, that's where you'd have to figure it out. Heck, I have to swim around and get her a pallet so that she can make it across water.
Just because she can't swim.
So
That's
she can't jump.
Taking care of your
She can't swim.
companion.
She can't jump. She
I
can't run.
think encouraging a 14-year-old to go cliff jumping is taking care of your companion.
Just put her in there with like 1 foot, and that can be a challenge to get somebody around because she's handicapped. Let's hear what people have to say. Let's ask them their opinion. Feel free to tell me I'm grossly wrong, but
Okay, you're grossly wrong.
Not
Everybody
you.
hop on Twitter
Shut
now
it.
and tell him he's grossly wrong.
Shut it. You've given your opinion.
Yeah.
All right, but anything else to add to it? What would you give your score? Is that a perfect score then for you? Is it a 10?
I think anything that sets a benchmark in for not only just in the industry itself and the development ethos, but then sets great expectations for gamers and pulls it off, then yeah, I do. I wouldn't say there are too many games that I've come across that even come close to The Last of Us that have been scored as highly. So yeah, I genuinely do, because I think it's that kind of that watershed moment where a lot of these developers that put out crap, full of flaws and so on, have woken up a bit and realised that there's so much more they can do, and they choose not to. And it's about time that those that dare to do something different, that dare to raise the bar so high, get the praise that they deserve, and rightly so. And other developers need to kind of follow suit with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it works out better for us all as gamers, because when a product like The Last of Us sets a new benchmark and grabs everyone's attention, regardless of what platform you hold, as I say, it encourages everybody to demand better quality and better games.
Yeah. Okay.
And hopefully developers will give us them.
So the perfect score, there you have it.
But it is worth pointing out that I don't think The Last of Us is perfect, but is it worth a 10 out of 10? Yes, because I think it's as close as we're going to come to perfect at this point in time.
All right.
Obviously that's going to change as the next generation of gaming goes forward, but who knows, we may see a 10 out of 10 on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, so, and it'll be interesting to see how that pushes the benchmark even further.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of the PodStation, and get your opinions in, put them online, post them. Feel free, share your opinion. That's what we're about.
Don't forget to rage.
Forget to rage.
Don't forget to rage at KD.
Okay.
Tell him he's wrong.
Yeah. Get me some hate mail.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm entitled to my opinion. You can all stick it. If you don't like it, that's fine. You disagree, that's fine. My opinion's my opinion. So, anyway, thank you for joining us, and look forward to the debate. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.
All right.